Welcome to What We Know Wednesday. So, what do we know? We know that lavender is amazing for lowering stress hormones in our body, and I know that you are smart enough to utilize her. So, in this study, it was kind of like a study of all the studies. These are common, but I like them because they put all the references in like one big chunk for me. Right? I can just dig down to the bottom and find all the studies I need. But they studied all the studies, and all of these studies said that lavender was amazing for lowering stress. Right, and they in particular they found a bunch of really stressed out college students, probably during finals or something like that, and they got them to start using lavender internally. And they showed that their stress levels like dropped by like 4 or 5% on the stress level scale, and that's a pretty big drop. Even if it doesn't sound like a big drop to you, I promise it is. It was to the people that were losing their minds, right? But why did this study of all the studies come to the conclusion that these studies showed that lavender was helpful for stress reduction? Well, let's learn about how lavender interacts with our brains, right? This study right here goes over all kinds of stuff about lavender for the nervous system, but the part we're going to pay attention to is what it does to our GABA acid levels, our dopamine levels, and our cortisol levels. Basically, in a little human speak nutshell, GABA acid and dopamine are things that make you feel good. Dopamine's a hormone, GABA is an amino acid. They work in your brain, they make you feel calm and happy. That's why we're always chasing dopamine hits, and that's why we get addicted to our phone. Because we're like, oh, dopamine, right? But when you have really high cortisol, which is a stress hormone, it rams down your GABA and your dopamine because they kind of compete for similar receptors in your brain, right? And then you feel stressed out, you could be depressed, you could be dealing with all kinds of issues like this in our modern day society on top of your own personal situations, right? But when we start working with whole lavender, either in tincture form, tea form, or capsule form, as long as it's real lavender, we can start reducing those cortisol levels. But one thing that I find really, really interesting about this little study right here, and they just snip it. They just kind of, oh well, this is information right here. It said that they were able to lower the glutamate overexcitability, like almost toxicity in these rats' brains. Now, I think that we don't focus enough on the damage of glutamate in our brain. Now, we need glutamate. It's kind of how like our neurons communicate, right? Like the little cells you imagine in your brain are like using glutamate. But when the glutamate levels in your brain are too high, it's like constant. So if you're somebody who's dealing with constantly racing thoughts that gives you anxiety or panic attacks, if you're dealing with OCD, anything in that level where ADHD, all this kind of stuff where you feel like you can't stop, you can't breathe, you can't function, and it's too much, too fast, too much all the time, you probably have high glutamate levels. Glutamate's important in our brain, but when it gets too high, it knocks down, you guessed it, it knocks down the GABA and the dopamine levels in our brain. And so it's like too much all the time. But lavender lowers glutamate. And did you know that high glutamate can also be linked to things like insomnia, high blood sugar issues, high cortisol issues? I think, again, that glutamate is highly overestimated. Now, our body makes glutamate, but also they put glutamate in everything we eat. It's not just called MSG. It could be called natural yeast. It could be called natural flavorings. It could be called all kinds of stuff. There are hundreds of names that they sneak MSG into your food, even if you're buying organic. So, lavender is really helpful for lowering stress and all these stress hormones across the board so our other feel good hormones can raise. And I think we could all use a little bit of help reducing our stress hormones these days. So, if you like learning about different herbs and my What We Do Wednesday and my pop-up classes and all the other information I share, make sure that you like, comment, subscribe, turn on notifications, and share. Sharing is super important because it helps other people realize that they are smart enough to do this too. We can take our health back into our own hands. And if you want to support my capacity to teach freely and randomly rant about things in the brain and, and just be a human with you in general, consider following the link in my bio or my description to my shop to call something home because it supports my capacity entirely to teach freely. So thank you so much for watching, folks, and we'll see you next time. Bye.